I still remember the way the theater smelled that night, a mixture of dust, old wood, and that distinct scent of anticipation that hangs in the air before a performance. The Westbrook Community Theater wasn't much compared to the grand venues in bigger cities, but to me, it was a sanctuary. In our small conservative town of Millfield, where everyone seemed to fit into neat little boxes, the theater was the one place where I felt I could breathe. My name is Jamie, and I'd been working as a stagehand for about 6 months at that point. It wasn't glamorous work, moving props, adjusting lights, helping with quick costume changes, but it kept me close to the magic of performance that I'd loved since childhood. Growing up in Millfield wasn't easy for someone who never quite fit in. While other kids were playing sports or joining the debate team, I was dreaming of Broadway lights and reading plays under my covers with a flashlight. My parents didn't understand my passion, viewing it as an impractical hobby at best. Theater people are different, my father would say, his tone making it clear that different wasn't a compliment in our household. But I persisted, and when I turned 22, I managed to land this job at the community theater while taking online classes in theater management. That particular evening, we were preparing for the opening night of The Glass Menagerie. The energy backstage was electric. Actors pacing and whispering their lines, costume designers making last-minute adjustments, and me, trying to make myself useful while secretly absorbing every moment. What I didn't know then was that this ordinary Thursday night would change everything for me. It would be the night I finally understood what it meant to be seen, truly seen, by someone else. Let me take you through what happened. The theater was an old converted church with high ceilings and wooden beams that creaked during quiet scenes. The stage was framed by heavy velvet curtains, a deep burgundy that had faded slightly over the years. Behind the stage was a maze of narrow passages, prop tables, and small alcoves where actors would wait for their cues. It was a world within a world, hidden from the audience but teeming with life and secrets. I was checking the props for the third scene when I heard laughter coming from behind the back curtain. Not the nervous laughter of actors before a show, but something more intimate, more conspiratorial. Curious, I moved toward the sound, pushing aside a section of the heavy fabric. That's when I saw them. 2 guys huddled in the small space between the curtain and the back wall, their faces close, sharing what looked like a private joke. The first guy, let's call him Marcus, was immediately striking. Tall with dark, curly hair and the kind of confidence that seemed to radiate outward. He was one of the lead actors, known for his charismatic stage presence and the way he could command attention just by walking into a room. The second guy was Eli, the lighting designer. He was quieter, more reserved, with thoughtful eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle smile that appeared rarely but transformed his face when it did. They both looked up when I accidentally rustled the curtain. There was a moment of silence, a frozen tableau where we all just stared at each other. I remember feeling like an intruder, like I'd stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to see. I started to apologize, to back away, when Marcus reached out and grabbed my wrist. "Wait," he said, his voice low but insistent. And then he pulled me into their hidden space, behind the curtain, away from the bustling activity of the pre-show preparations. "You're Jamie, right? The new stagehand?" Marcus asked, still holding my wrist. His touch was warm, and I was acutely aware of how close we all were in that small space. I nodded, unable to find my voice for a moment. "I'm Marcus, and this is Eli," he continued, finally releasing my wrist, but somehow maintaining the connection through his intense gaze. "We've seen you around," Eli added, his voice softer than Marcus's, but equally engaging. "You're always watching everything, taking it all in. You love the theater, don't you? Not just as a job." It was such a simple observation, but it hit me like a revelation. They had noticed me, really noticed me, when I'd spent most of my life feeling invisible. "Yeah," I managed to say. "I do. It's always been my escape." Marcus smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made my heart skip. "An escape," he repeated. "That's exactly it. That's why we're hiding back here too. Sometimes you need a moment away from everyone's expectations, right?" In that moment, something shifted between us. It wasn't just 3 people having a conversation anymore. It was a recognition, an understanding that we were all seeking something similar. Authenticity, connection, a space where we could be ourselves without judgment. 5 minutes to places. The stage manager's voice broke through our bubble, reminding us that there was a world beyond our hidden corner. "You should come find us after the show," Marcus said, his eyes holding mine. "We usually grab a coffee at that little place on Maple Street. The one with the terrible art but amazing cheesecake." I nodded, trying to appear casual while my mind raced with possibilities. "Sure, I'd like that." As I turned to leave, Marcus caught my hand again. "Hey," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Don't disappear on us, okay?" And there was something in the way he said it, a vulnerability beneath the confidence, that made me promise I wouldn't. The performance that night was a blur. I went through my tasks automatically, my mind constantly drifting back to that moment behind the curtain. I kept catching glimpses of Marcus on stage, his performance even more magnetic than usual, and occasionally I'd spot Eli in the lighting booth, his focused expression illuminated by the soft glow of his control panel. After the final curtain call, after the audience had filed out and the actors had taken off their makeup, I found myself hesitating. What if I'd misread the situation? What if they were just being friendly? But something pulled me toward that coffee shop on Maple Street. A curiosity, a hope, a sense that something important was waiting for me there. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. Just a few patrons scattered at tables, and in the corner, Marcus and Eli. They both looked up when I walked in, and the smile that spread across Marcus's face made my nervousness evaporate. He waved me over, already pulling out a chair for me. "We weren't sure you'd come," Eli said, sliding a mug of hot chocolate toward me. "Marcus ordered this for you. He noticed you drinking it during rehearsal breaks." Again, that feeling of being seen washed over me. "Thank you," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "The show was amazing tonight." "You were incredible," I added, looking at Marcus. He shrugged, but I could tell he was pleased. "It's easy to be good when the material speaks to you." Tennessee Williams understood longing better than almost any playwright. "Longing," I repeated, the word hanging in the air between us. "Is that what you two were talking about behind the curtain?" Before I interrupted, Marcus and Eli exchanged a glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Actually," Eli said, "we were talking about you." My surprise must have shown on my face because Marcus laughed softly. "Don't look so shocked. You're interesting. You move through that theater like you're collecting moments, storing them away. We were curious about your story." "There's not much to tell," I said, suddenly self-conscious. "Small-town kid with big city dreams. Tale as old as time. But it's your version of the tale that matters," Marcus said, leaning forward. "What are those dreams exactly? What are you looking for?" It was such a direct question, asked with such genuine interest, that I found myself answering honestly. "Connection, I guess. Understanding. The feeling that I'm where I belong, doing what I'm meant to do. In Millfield, I've always felt like I'm speaking a language no one else understands. Until the theater," Eli said, nodding. "Where suddenly everyone speaks your language." "Exactly," I agreed, feeling a rush of warmth at being understood. "What about you two? What brought you to Westbrook Community Theater?" And so began a conversation that flowed effortlessly into the night. Marcus told us about growing up in Chicago, studying acting, and then moving to our small town after a relationship ended badly. "I needed somewhere quiet to regroup," he explained. "Somewhere I could remember why I fell in love with acting in the first place." Eli shared his journey from engineering school dropout to lighting designer, how he discovered that he could tell stories with light and shadow as effectively as others did with words. "My parents still think it's a phase," he said with a rueful smile. "They keep sending me job listings for real careers." As we talked, I became increasingly aware of the dynamic between the three of us. There was an ease, a comfort that felt rare and precious. But there was also something else, an undercurrent of attraction that I couldn't quite define. Sometimes I'd catch Marcus looking at me with an intensity that made my skin tingle. Other times, I'd notice the gentle way Eli listened, how he seemed to catch every nuance of what I was saying. It was confusing and exhilarating all at once. Were they a couple? Were they interested in me? Was I reading too much into friendly gestures? The questions swirled in my mind, but I pushed them aside, choosing instead to simply enjoy the connection we were forming. The cafe was closing when we finally left, stepping out into the cool night air. "Where do you live?" Marcus asked. "We can walk you home. Oakwood Apartments, just a few blocks from here," I replied. "Perfect," Marcus said, falling into step beside me while Eli walked on my other side. "We're heading that way too." The walk was quiet but comfortable, our shoulders occasionally brushing in the narrow sidewalk. When we reached my building, I turned to thank them for the evening, but before I could speak, Marcus took my hand. "We're doing a small gathering at my place tomorrow after the show," he said. "Nothing fancy, just some of the cast and crew. Would you come?" I looked from him to Eli, who was watching me with those thoughtful eyes. "I'd love to," I said, and I meant it. "Good." Marcus smiled, giving my hand a gentle squeeze before letting go. "See you tomorrow then." As I watched them walk away, I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Something was happening here, something I couldn't quite name, but that felt significant. What I didn't know then was just how significant it would become. The next day at the theater was charged with a new energy. Every time I crossed paths with Marcus or Eli, there was a moment of recognition, a shared secret. During the performance, I found myself more attuned to Marcus's movements on stage, the way he embodied his character's yearning. And when I glanced up at the lighting booth, Eli would sometimes be looking back, offering a small smile before returning his attention to his controls. After the show, I helped with the strike, putting away props, adjusting the stage for the next day, all the while aware of a nervous anticipation building inside me. When everything was done, I changed out of my work clothes in the small bathroom, suddenly wishing I'd brought something nicer to wear to Marcus's gathering. I needn't have worried. When I arrived at his apartment, a surprisingly spacious loft above an old bookstore downtown, the atmosphere was casual and welcoming. About 15 people from the theater were there, scattered around the open living space, drinks in hand, engaged in animated conversations. Eli spotted me first, making his way through the crowd to greet me. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Can I get you something to drink? Wine? Beer?" Marcus makes a mean old-fashioned if you're feeling adventurous. "Wine would be great," I said, following him to a makeshift bar set up on a vintage desk. As Eli poured me a glass of red wine, Marcus appeared, draping an arm casually around my shoulders. "Jamie, welcome to my humble abode," he said, his voice warm near my ear. "What do you think? Not bad for small-town living, right?" The apartment was indeed impressive. High ceilings, exposed brick walls, large windows that looked out over the main street. It was filled with an eclectic mix of furniture and art that somehow worked together perfectly. "It's amazing," I said honestly. "How did you find this place?" "Luck," Marcus replied. "The owner of the bookstore downstairs is a theater lover. She came to see me in Waiting for Godot last year and offered me the apartment the next day. Said she'd rather rent to an artist than leave it empty." As the night progressed, I found myself constantly in the orbit of either Marcus or Eli. If one would drift away to talk to other guests, the other would appear at my side, introducing me to people, refilling my glass, making sure I felt included. It was subtle but unmistakable. They were taking care of me, making space for me in their world. The gathering began to thin out around midnight, people leaving in twos and threes until only a handful remained. I knew I should probably go too, but I was reluctant to break the spell of the evening. Marcus must have sensed my hesitation because he sat down beside me on the small sofa where I'd been chatting with one of the costume designers. "Stay a little longer?" he asked quietly, after the designer had excused herself. "We hardly got to talk tonight." I nodded, feeling a flutter of anticipation as he called across the room to Eli, who was saying goodbye to the last departing guests. "Eli, close the door and come join us. Jamie's staying for a nightcap." And just like that, it was the three of us again, sitting in Marcus's living room as the sounds of the town settling into night drifted through the partially open windows. Marcus poured us each a small glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light as he handed them around. "A toast," he said, raising his glass. "To new friends and unexpected connections." We clinked glasses, and I took a small sip, the whiskey burning pleasantly as it went down. There was a moment of silence, comfortable but charged with possibility. "Can I ask you something?" Eli said finally, his voice thoughtful. "What did you think when Marcus pulled you behind that curtain yesterday?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. I took another sip of whiskey, buying myself time to consider my answer. Honestly, I was confused at first, then curious. Then, I paused, wondering how honest I should be. "Then," Marcus prompted, his eyes intent on my face. "Then I felt like I'd been invited into something special," I admitted. like I'd been given a glimpse of something real in a world that often feels performative. Marcus and Eli exchanged a look that I couldn't quite interpret. Then Marcus set his glass down and turned to face me more directly. What if we told you that wasn't a one-time invitation? What if we wanted you to be part of whatever this is between us? My heart seemed to skip a beat. What exactly is this? I asked, gesturing between them. Eli smiled, that rare, transformative smile. We're still figuring that out ourselves. Marcus and I have known each other for about a year. We're not exactly together, but we're not exactly not together either. It's complicated. But what we do know, Marcus continued, is that we both feel drawn to you. There's something about you, Jamie, a genuineness, a passion that resonates with both of us. I looked between them, trying to process what they were saying. So you're suggesting? We're suggesting we explore this connection, Marcus said, reaching out to take my hand. No pressure, no expectations. Just three people seeing where this leads. It was terrifying and thrilling all at once. In Millfield, relationships like this, fluid, undefined, involving more than two people, weren't just uncommon. They were practically unheard of. What would people say? What would my family think? But sitting there, with Marcus's hand warm in mine and Eli's gentle gaze on us both, those concerns seemed distant and unimportant. I think I'd like that, I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. To explore this, I mean. The smile that spread across Marcus's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. He lifted my hand and pressed a soft kiss to my palm, a gesture so intimate it made my breath catch. Then, with a questioning look, he reached his other hand toward Eli, who took it without hesitation. And there we sat, the three of us connected in a simple but profound way, as the night deepened around us. We talked for hours, about our fears and hopes, about the challenges we might face, about the excitement of stepping into something unknown together. It was the most honest conversation I'd ever had, and by the time the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, I felt like I'd known them both for years rather than days. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of discovery. During the day, we maintained a professional distance at the theater, though there were stolen moments. Marcus pulling me into that same curtained alcove for a quick kiss, Eli's hand finding mine in the darkness of the lighting booth. The three of us sharing lunch in the empty auditorium, talking and laughing as if we'd always been together. Evenings were spent at Marcus's loft or Eli's cozy apartment near the park. We cooked dinner together, watched old movies, read plays aloud with each of us taking different parts. And slowly, cautiously, we explored the physical aspects of our relationship, the different dynamics between each pairing, the beautiful complexity of the three of us together. But it wasn't all romantic moments and easy connection. Reality had a way of intruding, particularly in a town like Millfield. The first time we faced real opposition was about a month into our relationship. We'd been careful, but not careful enough. Someone from the theater had seen Marcus and me holding hands as we walked through the park, and rumors spread quickly. The director of the theater, a well-meaning but traditional woman named Patricia, called me into her office one afternoon. "Jamie," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I need to talk to you about Marcus and Eli." My stomach dropped, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. "What about them?" Patricia sighed, folding her hands on her desk. "There are rumors, and I normally wouldn't pay attention to gossip, but, well, this is a small town. People talk, and the theater relies on community support. Are you asking me about my personal life?" I said, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. "I'm concerned about the theater's reputation," she replied. "And frankly, I'm concerned about you too. Marcus has a certain reputation for intensity, and adding Eli to the mix, it seems complicated." I felt a surge of anger, but beneath it was fear. This was exactly what I'd worried about: judgment, misunderstanding, the potential for real consequences. "My relationship with Marcus and Eli is my business," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It doesn't affect my work here." Patricia looked at me for a long moment. "You're right," she said finally. "It is your business. Just be careful, Jamie. Not everyone in Millfield is as open-minded as those of us in the theater community." I left her office shaken, but also strangely empowered. It was the first time I'd openly acknowledged our relationship to someone outside our circle, and despite the uncomfortable circumstances, it felt like a step toward authenticity. When I told Marcus and Eli about the conversation that evening, their reactions were characteristically different. Marcus was indignant, pacing around his living room with righteous anger. Who does she think she is? Our relationship has nothing to do with the theater. Eli, always the more reflective of the two, was quieter. She's not entirely wrong about the potential backlash, he said. We've been in our own bubble, but Millfield is still Millfield. Are we prepared for what might happen if our relationship becomes public knowledge? It was a question we'd been avoiding, but now we had to face it. Were we just a temporary experiment, something to be kept hidden? Or were we building something real, something worth defending? I don't want to hide, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. I've spent too much of my life trying to fit into spaces that weren't shaped for me. It feels right. It feels true. I don't want to pretend it's something to be ashamed of. Marcus stopped his pacing and came to sit beside me on the couch. I don't want to hide either, he said, taking my hand. But I also don't want to make your life difficult. Or Eli's. I've dealt with public scrutiny before. It's part of being an actor. But this is different. This is personal. Eli joined us, sitting on my other side. Maybe it's not about making a grand statement, he suggested. Maybe it's just about living honestly, day by day. Not hiding, but not inviting unnecessary conflict either. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it felt right for where we were. We agreed to be authentic with each other and with those close to us, but to be mindful of the context we were in, a small, conservative town that might not be ready for a relationship like ours. The next few months were a delicate balance. There were difficult moments. Whispers when we entered local restaurants together, a few parents who pulled their children from the theater's youth program, a tense dinner with my parents where I tried to explain our relationship and was met with uncomfortable silence. But there were beautiful moments too. The night Eli's lighting design won a regional award, and Marcus and I sat in the audience bursting with pride. The weekend trip we took to the coast, where we walked on the beach at sunset, our fingers intertwined in a tangle of connection. The evening Marcus came home from an audition for a major regional theater, his face alight with excitement, and we celebrated with champagne and dancing in his living room. And through it all, our relationship deepened and evolved. We learned each other's rhythms. How Marcus needed space when he was preparing for a role, how Eli processed emotions through quiet contemplation, how I sometimes doubted my place in their lives and needed reassurance. We weren't perfect. We had arguments and misunderstandings. But we always found our way back to each other, to the unique balance we'd created. The turning point came during the theater's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Marcus was playing Oberon, and I had been promoted from stagehand to assistant stage manager. It was opening night, and everything was chaos backstage. One of the set pieces, a crucial tree that was supposed to transform during the fairy scenes, malfunctioned just before curtain. I was trying to fix it, panic rising as the minutes ticked down, when suddenly Eli was there, his calm presence a balm to my frayed nerves. "Let me help," he said, and together we managed to repair the mechanism just in time. As the audience filed in and the actors took their places, Marcus found us in the wings. He was already in costume, ethereal and commanding as the fairy king. "My heroes," he whispered, pressing a quick kiss to each of our foreheads before taking his position for his entrance. The performance was magical, one of those rare nights when everything aligns perfectly, the actors, the audience, the technical elements all in harmony. During the final scene, as the lovers were being sorted into their proper pairs, I stood in the wings watching Marcus on stage. He caught my eye during a moment when he wasn't speaking, and in that brief connection, I felt something settle inside me. This was where I belonged, not just in the theater, but with these two men who had pulled me into their world and changed mine forever. After the show, after the applause and the congratulations, the three of us walked home together under a sky full of stars. We didn't speak much, content in the shared silence and the warmth of being together. When we reached Marcus's loft, Eli turned to face us both. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice quiet but clear in the night air. "About us. About what we're building together. And I want you both to know, this isn't temporary for me. This isn't an experiment or a phase. This is real. You two are my home." Marcus reached out, pulling Eli into an embrace. "You're my home too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." They turned to me, their faces open and vulnerable in the soft light from the street lamp. And I knew, with a certainty that filled every part of me, that I had found what I'd been looking for all my life, that sense of belonging, of being truly seen and accepted. "I love you," I said simply. "Both of you. Differently, but equally. And I'm not afraid anymore of what people might think, of what the future holds. As long as we're together, I'm not afraid." Marcus smiled, that radiant smile that had first captured my attention behind the curtain. "Then let's not be afraid together," he said, extending his hand to me. I took it, and Eli's hand too, and together we walked into the building, into the next chapter of our story. It wouldn't always be easy. Love rarely is, especially love that doesn't fit neatly into society's expectations. But as we climbed the stairs to Marcus's loft, I knew that what we had found together was worth any challenge we might face. That night, as we lay tangled together in Marcus's bed, I thought about the moment that had started it all. That chance encounter behind the stage, Marcus pulling me into the curtained alcove, refusing to let me disappear back into the shadows. It could have been just a fleeting connection, a brief moment of understanding between strangers. Instead, it had become the beginning of the most authentic relationship I'd ever known. In the theater, we're taught that the most powerful stories are those that reveal truth about human nature, about connection, about the complexities of love. What I've learned is that the same is true in life. Our relationship might not look like the traditional love stories I grew up with, but its truth is undeniable. Three people who found each other in an unexpected place, who chose to be brave together, who created a love that was uniquely their own. And isn't that, after all, what the best stories are about? Not fitting into prescribed roles, but finding the courage to write your own narrative, to step out from behind the curtain and into the light, hand in hand with those who see you, truly see you, and love you anyway. Total _char_count, 18,634.